VCU. Thank you for joining us for this fabulous speech tonight. We welcome our lecturer, Captain Alex Keisch, and our co-sponsors, the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. Tonight is an opportunity for us to join together, learn and grow as a community. We welcome Holocaust refugee, and we'll excuse the warm introduction. Holocaust refugee Captain Alex Keisch, the son of Jewish partisans, was born in the waning days of World War II city of Krakow in Poland. Growing up in Connecticut, nurtured his love for the sea and led him to the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York. After graduation, he traveled the world over on nearly a score of different deep-sea vessels as a licensed deck officer, rising through the ranks to eventually command 10 different ships for 3 different companies. Alex Keisch, the proverbial wandering Jew, settled in Richmond, Virginia in the fall of 1984 with his wife Diane and their 10-month-old daughter Heather. He gave up his seagoing career and transitioned from co-owning a high-volume portrait studio and church directory photography business with his wife to that of final expense life insurance salesman. Today, he sits in the front row, but he also sits on the executive council of the Board of Trustees at the Virginia Holocaust Museum, and for the past 13 years has led their tours as a volunteer docent. Captain Keisch is the groundskeeper for the National and State Historical Site, the Emek Shalom Holocaust Memorial Cemetery, and serves as their vice president of the Board of Trustees. Captain Keisch will be this year's chairman and host for their annual Kristallnacht service in November. He proudly serves on the board of the Advisory Council of the SS United States Conservancy, working to save that great icon of American know-how and ingenuity for future generations. Captain Keisch, a longtime member of the Council of American Master Mariners, is the vice president of the Richmond chapter of the Kings Point Alumni Association. He is often called on to perform his duties as motivational speaker and lecturer, speaking at grade schools, middle schools, high schools, universities, military bases, synagogues, churches, and civic groups. And he is currently writing his memoirs. Holocaust refugee Captain Alex Keisch is an engaging speaker who uses humor, warmth, and hard facts that he filters through his personal perspective of the Holocaust to teach a simple but not simplistic approach to help us all to stop bullies. His talk today is titled Tolerance, the Road to Acceptance. Please help me welcome Captain Keisch.
Well done. Thank you. Can you turn it on? Yeah. Rabbi Friedman, thank you so very much for that very warm and embracing introduction. It's almost as if I could have written that myself. You know, when you're captain of a large merchant ship, sometimes you get a little headstrong and a little heady and carried away with oneself. And what's important during those circumstances is to have an anchor to leeward. What that means is it's like a balloon that needs to be anchored. So one day I came home and told my wife, I said, "You won't believe the ship I'm going to be captain of." I mean, it is a huge vessel. It's almost 1,000 feet long. It goes 16 knots. I have a 3-room suite on the ship. And not only that, in my bathroom, I've got a shower. It was built in France. I have a bidet. I said, it's as magnificent a vessel as you'll ever want to see or want to be a part of. And I said to her, in your wildest dreams, could you ever have seen me in such a position? And she said, "Alex, I don't know how to tell you this, but you never have been in my wildest dreams." Ladies and gentlemen, Six million Jews were murdered last century for the crime of being born a Jew. I'm a Jew who survived as a refugee from that terrible, terrible time. The seminal event of the 20th century was the Holocaust. The largest murder of a people in the history of mankind. To begin with, what I'd like to do is just ask you all for a moment, 1 minute of silence. In Israel, they stop all traffic. There's a siren. So for 1 minute of silence, just for those that we have lost, who are erased from this earth forever. Thank you for that. Now, if I were to ask for your silence for 1 minute for each of those 6 millions, our silence would last a very, very long time. And sometimes memories do sneak out of not just my eyes, but out of Amanda's eyes as well. Amanda Prack is one of our guests here today, and she's a refugee from the Cambodian slaughter. We talked about that just a while ago. When I first began on this journey to speak to people, telling the story of my life survival from the Holocaust and what's happened since then, I never wanted to stand in a group of people where everyone will say, "Oh my gosh, Alex, I'm so sorry for," and that is not my purpose to be here. My purpose is to give you a message to take home with you, something you can put in your pocket and use for the future. So we begin on an educational journey. I'm going to start with the definition of genocide, the Holocaust, my family's story of death and survival, the difference between tolerance and acceptance. It's not a semantic trick. There is a difference. Is bullying a gateway to genocides? You decide. Backsliding into genocides and the new anti-Semitism. The awful consequences of bullying. How a systemic approach will stop bullies today. What I do, and much more importantly, I'm but one person, what you can do. I call this journey tolerance, the road to acceptance. My dear friend and gifted IT man, Ed Quickly's in the front row here. He helped design this for me. Thanks, Ed. At the Virginia Holocaust Museum, tolerance through education is a motto, but is tolerance enough? This was our older one. So you need to just ask yourself, do you want your mother to tolerate you? Would you rather she accept you? Very simple lesson. And this is who we are today, the Virginia Holocaust Museum. If you had not yet been, please come. We've had nearly 50,000 visitors last year. We'll do many more this year. Genocide. Deliberate killing of a large group of people, especially those of a particular ethnic origin. Anti-Semitism. What is it? Discrimination, prejudice, or hostility towards Jews. Holocaust. It's a genocide that murdered Jews. It's a word of Greek origin, meaning to sacrifice by fire. And of course, it alludes to the ovens that would consume many of our bodies. I'm going to poll the audience. How many people think there was more than one genocide last century? Keep your hand up if you think there's more than 3. Keep your hand up if you think there's more than 5. You may put your hands down. We have the Armenian genocide. By the way, some scholars believe there are 12 steps to a genocide, the last of which is denial. You deny it ever happened. The Turks have not yet come to grips with that. They can't begin to heal until they come to grips with that. The kulaks, 3 to 17 million in the Soviet Union, purposely starved to death. European Jews, which we'll be talking about today a lot. The Cambodian genocide. We said never again, and what happened? Cambodian genocide. We said never again as Jews in the Bosnian Muslim genocide. And we said never again as Jews in the Rwandan genocide. And again, and again. And now it's spilling over to this century. The Syrian genocide, the horrible pictures of the children. If only one man dies of hunger, that is a tragedy. If millions die, it's a footnote in history. It's a statistic. Joseph Stalin starved to death 3 to 17 millions of his own peasants. The story of the Holocaust probably begins earlier than this, but I'm going to call January 30th, 1933, when Hitler was selected to power. The fact of the matter is, he never was elected, he was selected. And the time was right for him to be there. Those of you who are Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts will remember the fire triangle. You need all three sides of the fire triangle in order to have a fire. If you remove one side, you can't have a fire. You need combustible material, you need oxygen, you need an ignition source. The Germans suffered horribly after the First World War, the reparations they had to pay, the humility they had to absorb. It wore heavily on them. And they never lost the war. They were stabbed in the back. That became their dialogue. The international Jewry, the international bankers of Jews, are the ones that stabbed them in the back. Within 90 days of being selected to power, Hitler opened up the very first concentration camp. It was not set up to house and murder Jews, it was for political dissidents. Hundreds of laws, over 500 in the next several of years would follow, each one limiting the ability for Jews to be alive, to live at all in Germany. Hitler, like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, played that hypnotic song. Hi Dave, glad you're here. And little by little, the people followed him, one little step after another, one little step after another. He had his thugs, brown shirts and SS, who would do his bidding for him, his thuggery for him. But what he needed was the people behind him to fulfill everything that he needed to fulfill. And these baby steps, like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, if you recall, the Pied Piper of Hamelin led these little rat-like creatures off to an edge of the cliff where they jumped to their death into the ocean. That's who Hitler was, playing his little hypnotic pipe. But he needed an ignition source to set off what would become the most horrific time in world history. On November 7th, 1938, a 17-year-old Polish-German Jew, Herschel Greenspan, gave him that ignition source. See, one of the things Hitler was going to do, he's going to expel all the Jews, send them back to Poland, send them back where they were. About 20,000 to 30,000 Jews lived in no man's land between Poland and Germany. And the Poles didn't have any money. They didn't want more people to look after. Does this sound familiar, people? They were suffering miserably. They were hungry. They were cold. It was a very hostile climate. They lived in tents, barely eking out life, not a living, life. And Herschel Greenspan's mother and father were there, and he was very upset. He was a student in Paris, and he walked into the embassy there, bound and determined to murder, to kill, to shoot, to get headlines for this awful condition that these Jews were in. The ambassador walked past him. He didn't know who he was. So he walked in and said, I want to talk to the ambassador. And von Roth was the only person there, and they allowed him to see him. And he shot him 3 times. November 8th, it's reported in the German press. November 9th at 5:30 p.m., the German press reports von Roth's death. And instantaneously, a riot ensues in all the German-speaking countries that Hitler is in control of. He now controls Austria. That summer he controlled Austria, the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, which is primarily German-speaking people as well. The Jews had fired the first shot, quote unquote, within hours. The brutalities began. The night of November 9th and the morning of November 10th, 1938, will be forever called Kristallnacht. Why was it called Kristallnacht? Well, because the broken glass. This night, your neighbors, your friends, strangers would burst into your home, beat you up, beat your mother, father up. 26,000 were dragged off to concentration camps, many of them never to be seen again. 99 were murdered. Hundreds of our synagogues were desecrated, ransacked, burned, as were thousands of our Torahs, our holy Torahs. And it was not Hitler's brown shirts and thugs. It was the German people themselves. So Hitler got what he was looking for, the cooperation of the people behind him. I can tell you millions of dollars of businesses were lost and all the other statistics I gave you, but to put a face on a large number sometimes is difficult, so what I'm going to do is share with you that the night was given its name because the broken plate glass from the Jewish store plate glass windows that were broken that night. Belgium was the #1 plate glass producing country in the world. Had Belgium stopped all their production just to replace the glass broken this one night, they would have to work 1 full year, Denise, just to replace. That's how complete the destruction was. And as significant as any one of those specific things were, what was even worse was this was the night the Germans, like the rat-like creatures, lemmings of old, joined hands and jumped off a cliff in unison into a chasm of hell, death, and destruction, likes of which the world had never seen before, and better pray the world never sees again. Do you think the German people have been prepared for this event? Yes. These stars of David were not placed on these people until 1941, after Hitler invaded Poland. We were considered life not worthy of living. This is my mother, Silly Keisch. It's a diminutive for the word Cecilia, the variations of that name. She was born in Lvov, Ukraine. My father was a poor Polish peasant boy. I still haven't found out exactly where he was born. But he's one of 13 children. When you're on a farm, a shtetl, small village, you need a lot of family members in order to make a living, in order to eat. The dictates on the were onerous, heavy-handed, draconian. As a Jew, you can no longer make a living in any licensed capacity. Back then, everything was licensed: butcher, baker, candlestick maker, doctor, attorney, teacher, public, everything was licensed. As a Jew, I didn't look much different from most Caucasian Europeans. My facial features weren't much different. My skin color wasn't much different. And in my own little shtetl, my village, my town, people who knew me, I'm Alex the Jew, was not necessarily a derogatory term. It just identified who I was. Like Joe the tailor, Sally the baker. But if I wandered too far from my village, people didn't travel that much back then, 50 miles, 60 miles, 100 kilometers. They wouldn't know I was Alex the Jew. How would they know to discriminate against me? So I was forced to wear a Star of David. That's how they did that. As a Jew, I couldn't walk on sidewalks. That was reserved for humans. I was Untermenschen. I was barely human. I had to walk in the gutter through the excrement that the animals left behind. The majority of Jews said, this is nuts, this is crazy, this is insane. But don't look back, don't look forward, don't ask questions, just keep moving forward. It's a storm, all storms will pass. 937 Jews on May 13th, 1939 said the storm will pass, but will we still be alive? So they booked passage on the motor vessel St. Louis, bound for Havana, Cuba. They don't speak the language. They have no money with them. All their goods, their wealth was confiscated. They're going to get searched. You're allowed to bring the equivalent of $5. Today might be $50. Malik, here's $50. Go to Russia, make a living. Tough. But it was better than what was happening. So they jumped on board the ship, bound for Havana, Cuba, with a couple of dozen non-Jews, Gentiles we call them. By the time they get to Havana, Cuba, the Cuban Foreign Services have been working with the German Foreign Services to disallow their visas. The Gentiles go ashore, you guys aren't going anywhere. But where there's hope, there's life. And where there's life, there's hope. And they know all about the Statue of Liberty. Can't see my pointer, but there it is right there. The Statue of Liberty, it says, give us your huddled masses, give us your poor, who represent this class of people more than this huddled mass of poor Jews. So they went up to see Gustav Schroeder, the captain of the ship, one of the few people on board who was not a Nazi. He understood what their plight would be, and he allowed them to contact a Jewish relief agency in America. That agency then sent a delegation to see the president, and the ship sailed with high hope and great expectations toward the Miami Beach sea buoy. I know many of you know how large our country is. I have a fellow Kings Pointer here who really knows. Not only does he travel quite widely, but he flies over the country. That's his job. It's immense. By the time the ship got to the Miami Beach sea buoy, a Coast Guard cutter came out and said, drop anchor. You're not coming in. Now, why is that? In this immense, welcoming, kind country of ours? Was there not room for 937 people? The operative word, ladies and gentlemen, was Jews. Thank you. Not room for 937 of you damnable Jews. Thank you. Cheers. Back then as today, we have a similar concern, somewhat similar. Back then, we were very worried about Hitler bringing spies here to America and doing us real harm. They called these type of people the fifth column, damaging our industries and our infrastructure, hurting our armed production. It was real. J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, captured 26 spies from Long Island on down to Florida. So while the ship was anchored, there was a marvelous idea that was concocted by a senator from New York and a representative from Massachusetts. Senator Wagner and the lady from Massachusetts was named Rogers. What harm could children do? What if we bring 20,000 children into America? 20,000 Jewish children, we can save their lives. No one over 14 years of age, kindle, babies. It died in subcommittee, never made it to the floor for passage, for vote. Never made it to the floor for vote. There was a lady named Laura Delana Hoteling. She was the wife of the immigration commissioner. She kind of verbalized what most of the country felt at the time, and much of the world as well. She said 20,000 charming children would too soon turn into 20,000 ugly adults. Really? So the trolls will out. The trolls will out. We have a similar problem today. However, I will share this with you. The problem today that we worry about people coming in to harm us is about like a carbuncle on your butt as compared to what the Germans almost accomplished. What the Germans almost accomplished, they're this far away. And had they done that, I wouldn't be here. Young man, you're the wrong color. You wouldn't be here either. They get you too. You're right down the bottom of the scale of what their concerns were too. And the rest of you would be speaking German. So that was a real concern then. Irony. Pets magazine a year later during the Blitzkrieg of London, they didn't want these poor doggies to get hurt. How about they were inundated. Thousands of people say, we'll protect those poor doggies. We ain't got room for one Jew though. I'd like to say because it was an undercurrent of anti-Semitism, it was not. It was a main vein of anti-Semitism, not just in America, but throughout the world. Henry Ford proves that the opposite side of the coin of genius oftentimes is insanity. Insanity. The problem with the Jew, the problem with sports in America, the Jew. He called us the Jew. Eventually, Hitler would use his mad writings as part of his propaganda. Eventually, 3 books were made of his writings. I had one book, and I'm so sorry I lent it out. I never did get it back. But I'll share with you one of the excerpts that I do recall very vividly. One of the things he ranted about was how awful it was that the Jew went to Africa and took that damnable, demonic African jungle music. It's so demonic I couldn't even get it out. And brought it to America purposely to despoil America's youth. After my talk today, the way I'm going to relax on the way home is listening to some of that terrible stuff. It's called jazz. It just went on and on and on here in America. This is Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss did a lot of stuff that was really cool. Lindbergh. Well, who the heck was Lindbergh? Who cares? Lindbergh was the #1 hero, the #1 face to the world that America had at that time. People were naming their firstborn children Lindsay. Their dogs were named Lindy. And this is the crap that he served up. As a matter of fact, it was so horrible. It was so good that Goebbels liked it so much, he had Hermann Göring give him an award, special award. And what did Franklin Delano Roosevelt say about this? He said to Morgenthau, his secretary, Treasury Secretary, if I should die tomorrow, I want you to know in my heart, no children here? The bastard's a Nazi. Thank you. That's not what he said, that's what I said. It didn't end there. Father Charles Coughlin had 30 to 45 million weekly radio audience. Who listens to the radio? This is a combination of the internet and TV today. Think about 138 million people here in America and about a third of the population listening to this crap. Famous speech in the Bronx. He gave a Nazi salute and yelled out. Yeah, I don't even want to say it. You can read it. Captain Gustav Schroeder of the St. Louis won a very special place in heaven. Declared righteous among the nations on March 11th, 1993. It was awarded by Yad Vashem, the International Museum of the Holocaust Remembrance in Israel. Righteous among the nations. He was a righteous Gentile. He sits beside God because of that. And the reason he was awarded that is because he let all of his passengers off in Antwerp. Nobody wanted to be saddled with that many Jews. Even one Jew's too many. So they spread them out. A couple hundred to France, a couple hundred to Holland, 325 to England. Those in England did survive. Those on the continent, not so much. I was fortunate about 10 years ago. I had a middle school teacher that came with his students, and I did a tour for them. At the end of the tour, he gave me a disc with pictures of his father and his aunt, young children on board the ship, who were hidden by a convent of nuns in France. Their reward, were they be caught, would be a bullet in the brain. There's always something you can do. Always. My father was a pretty tough guy, been a conscript in the Polish army. He said, yeah, right, I'm going to put up with that crap. Not. So he and 20 to 30,000 other Jews fled to the great woods of Eastern Europe called Pusha. It's very dense, very ancient forest. And my mother from her home fled as well. And they met in the woods when she was 18 years old and they were married. Anyone here seen the movie Defiance? It's a pretty good movie, but I challenge you to Google Defiance, because when you do that, up will pop Bielski brothers. That's who the movie is written about, the four Bielski brothers. When I read the book, it sent a chill up my spine because I thought I was reading the story of my father. You see, my father had been a conscript in the Polish army. The head of the Bielski brothers had as well. There were four brothers from Belarus. My father was a strong, single-minded, leader-type individual. So was Tuvia, called him Zeus. He was the head of the Bielski clan. My father very seldom would talk about this time. He would call this my days in the woods. And occasionally a story would come out, but only if it was prompted. I said to Dad, one time as a little boy, he had this big bump right here. I said, Dad, what's that bump? What's going on there? So he told me the story. You just don't sit in the woods waiting for the next day to happen. You went on patrol. You go on patrol looking for German soldiers because they're on patrol looking for you. If they find you, you're dead. If you find them, they're dead. You're going to go on patrol because you're looking for food. Eating bark and grass, that doesn't last too long. So one day my father was in a building he had no business being in. And he's walking down a blind corridor, and unbeknownst to him, a German officer was walking down the adjacent blind corridor, and they met just like that. And the officer could not get his pistol, couldn't get the safety off his pistol. He just pulled out his holster and just smacked him upside the face like that, tearing his nostril, knocking about 3 or 4 teeth out. My father was strong, athletic, and kind of knocked him on his butt, jumped over him out the window. And every Jew who survived will tell you that their lives turned just on a dime, just like that. Sometimes more than once, like my father. This is what my father looked like during that time. Someone once asked me after one of these talks, he said, did your father ever wear a Star of David? I never even thought about it, because I know what my father would have said, and he doesn't even speak Italian. That's Italian, right? Holocaust Red Bullet. 1.5 million Jews were slaughtered in the East before the first concentration camp was built. Now the estimate, they say, may go north of 6 or 10 million additional, because no one ever kept an accurate count of the Jews that were there. Dr. Waitman Bourne, a recent director of our museum, is a scholar of this part of the Holocaust. Marching into Darkness is the book that I recommend you read if you care to. It's a very interesting look inside the German operation. It was not just the Eisenstadt group that we're familiar with that did the killing. The regular German army did as well. Jew hunts, they would call that. And by the way, we all have choices If you said, I can't kill a woman, I can't kill a child, I can't kill an unarmed man, they put you in another part of the unit. You didn't have to do that. So only people that were so inclined to do that, and there were many, did this. As a matter of fact, it became a spectator sport, killing Jews. See that guy there? That's a tanker uniform. He's got no business here in this outfit. It was just part of the spectacle, the sideshow. This picture used to bother me for a very long time. The first night of Pesach, Passover, April 19th, 1943, the Germans were going to go in and wipe out the whole Warsaw ghetto in 3 days. The Jews held out for 31 days. Very little ammunition, very little of anything, other than a lot of chutzpah. Those of you who don't speak Yiddish, in Mexico they call it cojones. If you need some help with your language, see Rabbi Friedman later. This picture used to give me nightmares. It's a capture the newsreel because they were very proud of what they were doing. Here are the brave German soldiers with their automatic weapons, big, tall Hessians, holding them against women and children who were just flushed out of a bunker and hiding in a basement in the Warsaw Ghetto. I looked at this for many years. I said, what'd that little boy do? Now, if my father had been killed, he was a soldier. You kill and you are killed. What did this little guy do? Except choose the wrong womb to be born from? And then something interesting happened. The more I talk, the more I research. The more I research, the more I learn. The more I teach, the more I learn. And I found this article. I said, whoa, that is awesome. This no longer gives me nightmares. This is very uplifting now because there's something here that we all miss. Someone noticed this and wrote an article about it, and I happened to find it. Can you find it? Can you find something uplifting? How about that little girl hiding behind her mother's skirts? That's all she's got. She's sticking her tongue out at the SOBs. Take that. That's all she has. The indomitable human spirit. Eisenhower couldn't believe what he saw. This was one of the out camps of Buchenwald. He asked his boss, General Marshall, if he could bring his soldiers in there, his generals in there to look at this. It was just awful. They were digging up the bodies, trying to hide the evidence by burning them up. Patton at first refused to go. He would only go on the, and General Patton, if you don't know, was the America's general of generals. He was bold, he was audacious. The German really feared him. He went across, ahead of his supply lines. Shrapnel sometimes would burst around him. His aides would have to pull him back. Saw death and dying on a daily basis, but he refused to go until they gave him a barf bucket because he couldn't stand what the heck he was looking at. It was that terrible. Little by little, the Russian armies pushed the German armies further westward, and very hesitating and very slowly, because one of the reasons these people survived, my father included, was you don't believe anything anyone tells you. The war's over. Pop your head up, you're dead. Backing up just a little bit, I just recall Tuvia and his brothers saved about 1,200 people because they would go into ghettos and pull out whole pieces of ghettos. The reason they did that was because Tuvia, right in the beginning, said that I would rather save the life of one old Jewish woman than to kill 10 German soldiers. And because that's what the direction he took. My father, since he wouldn't speak much about this, I never learned a whole lot till after he died. And then some of his schmelke, some of his buddies that survived his days in the woods with him, came up to me and said, I'm alive because your father has. Why is that? Well, it turns out they were engineers, they were shopkeepers, they were garment workers, they were city people. They had no idea what to do in the woods. My father looked after them, and they told me that the Germans feared to go in the part of the woods where his partisans were working. So not trusting anyone, not believing anyone, to the day he died, I'm sure he thought that Humpty Dumpty was pushed. He did not fall. Doubted everything that you said to him. Little by little, they got to Krakow, Poland. My mother had hid from and fought the Germans through 2 trimesters of pregnancy. 2 trimesters, fragile women, nope. Although my mother and father had lived in a hole in the ground, weeks, months, years, I have no idea. They never told me. I knew that they lived in a hole in the ground. My father told me that. But it would no longer do. The place is overrun with refugees. Where to go, what to do. My mother was now in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy. So here's where we wound up. Anyone here seen Schindler's List? It's a remarkably accurate, mind-shattering movie. I can't watch more than 10 minutes at a time. I start getting nightmares. But this is where Oskar Schindler, the German industrialist, drew about 1,100 Jews, pretending he needed them to work in his factory. He just had a lot of heart, and he saved a few lives. But Plaszow existed because the Germans were hiding what they were doing. The reason I showed you the picture of the trench and the Jews being thrown into it, many hardcore Nazis felt that this was a mission, Malik. They were on a mission to expunge the world of vermin. They considered us rats and cockroaches. So right to the end and afterwards, they were shooting and killing Jews. But there were some sane Germans, and they knew a day of reckoning would come. And this camp was set up to go into the woods, go in the fields, go in the forest, and exhume these bodies and then burn them up. They would work you to death in 4 weeks. They had a crematoria on board, but it was just expressly to burn up the bodies of the people that they killed, working them to death. So what they did when the Russian armies approached, they started dismantling the whole camp. And there was some pieces of it left. This is what it looks like today. So April 21st, 1945, my twin brother and I were here. We were born right there in the field, in one of those buildings perhaps, maybe in a tent, I don't know. Hitler committed suicide April 30th, 1945, and the peace was signed May 8th, 1945. So I truly was born at the very end of these very terrible of times. Now, my father didn't trust the Soviets any more than he trusted the Nazis. Stalin was a bigger SOB, or as big as Hitler was, and probably killed as many or more people than Hitler did. So as soon as he could, he took my brother and me like two little footballs, running through the fields, running through the forest, running through the frontiers. One day I said to Dad, I said, "What's that on your calf? What's that?" A piece of his calf this much was missing. I was a little boy. He said, "That's where I was shot, carrying you boys running through the fields." He was a tough guy. He kept going. My mother dragged behind. By September 17th, 1945, we wound up in West Berlin in one of the 2 American Red Cross camps in the American sector. And this, of course, is one of my favorite photos of my family. This is my mother. I mean, she's just as beautiful as any 1940s or 50s Hollywood movie star. My father had a very strong presence when he walked in the room. He had eyes like a pale blue sky, like a Malamute or a husky dog might have, almost clear, you can almost see through them. Another reason why this is a favorite picture of mine, because Sarah, I want you to take special note of this. I know you study the human condition. So I want you to take special note to bear witness to the fact that, should you meet my brother, that even back then I was the better looking twin. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, poor Walter takes a beating when he's not here. And there we are again. Now, my father after the war was a macher. The same Widerstand, the cunning, the street smarts that kept him alive made him very successful after the war. It was like the Wild West. You don't turn your back on anybody. But he used all of his money looking for family that he never found. Again, it's easy to see who the better looking twin is. Never mind, we won't go there. And he also used his money to treat us like little stuffed gooses. People were starving to death. The Germans were eating mud pies, put something in their stomach, and look at our little fat cheeks. He would brag how well he was doing. One of the ways he would brag is, watch what they can eat. Still have problems with that today. It was just before we left for America. Okay, so Walter took one good picture, his Robert Mitchum pose. Here's my father. Back then you didn't have color photography at all, so this was hand painted. His eyes were much paler than that. I have 2 daughters, each of them the same high forehead that my mother had. One looks almost exactly like my mother. I'm very blessed for that. My father would do anything he could for my mother, but he couldn't create that which didn't exist. One of the ironies of my personal life is that as a ship's captain, I had a very large tanker I was bringing to the Persian Gulf. We're in the Sea of Japan in transit, and one of my sailors was very sick. We were one of the early satellite communication systems on board, and we got in touch with Clark Air Force Base, who then brought a helicopter 600 miles, had to be refueled en route, dropped it on the ship, took the sailor off. And when he got back to Clark Air Force Base, within 24 hours, they operated on him. So I was able to do for him, saved his life, that which my father couldn't do for my mother. She died from abdominal obstruction. It's something that if any one of you wind up getting, boom, you're in the hospital, the next day you're in the bed having been operated on already. It just wasn't available. So my father went out doing his business. One day I got back from Odessa on a ship. I was telling him about my experience. He said, oh, let me tell you about when I was in Odessa. I said, what the hell were you doing in Odessa? Well, he's all over the place. Back then, it wasn't any big thing. Everyone spoke 4 or 5 languages. My father certainly did. But he's had a lot of death threats against him because he was very aggressive, he was very assertive, and he had a wild, wild, horrible temper. And so what he did, he got us this dog, Hassa, the very first dog we ever had. The dog was just a kind, as gentle a dog as you ever would want, very bright. If you unlocked the door from the outside and he was on the inside, he'd open the handle for you so you could walk in. But if he made one aggressive move towards us, boom, your arm's gone, Eddie. One day my father came home and he found the dog was poisoned and he got very concerned. So he took my brother and me and he hid us in Switzerland. Just a little history, a little geography. Here's the birthplace of my mother. There's where my brother and I were born. Here's where we wound up in West Berlin, and that's where we hid out. My very first ocean voyage, aboard the General Sturgis, there were 3 ships that were built for transit for the war, for troops after the war. They were no longer needed. They called them MSC today. Back then was MSTS, Marine Sea Transport Service. And they were bringing refugees from Northern Europe to America, Canada, and to Australia also. How can you not smile when you see the Statue of Liberty and all that it stands for? And when we saw the Statue of Liberty, bangity, bangity, didn't know quite what all the fuss was all about, but my excitement peaked with that of the other passengers. And here we are. You have to remember how Europe was in total desolation, destruction, and from the Phoenix, 2 twins emerged, so we were the hit of the photographers. We went on the international services. They enjoyed taking our picture. The relief services here in America were just overwhelmed, and they had to unite several of them to create the USNA. Now, my father went back to Europe. Read the book, you'll find out about it. And we were separated. We were adopted then by a wonderful, charming, loving, caring, childless family. For the very first time in our lives, we felt secure, we felt safe, we felt loved. It was a great feeling. This was me at a birthday party. And here's my cousin from that relationship, Cindy Crumbine. Anybody know Cindy? And that's her mother, Lillian over there, and Joe, her father. His brother was my adopted father. May the memories be a blessing. I mean, who had a better life than these 2 kids, huh? It was great. I mean, we lived on Queen Street, right at the bottom of the street. Run down the hill, you go to the next street, there's King Street. And the bottom of the hill of King Street was the King Street Elementary School. Life was good. Anybody seen The Christmas Story? Don't he look like Ralphie there? Going to shoot his eye out with a BB gun? So here I am, enjoying life as much as any American child would want to enjoy life. And I'm in the 2nd grade, swaddled, safe, secure, taking care of my business in the little boy's room. In comes a little friend of mine from my class, taking care of his business next to me. I'm always tall for my age, so he looked up at me and said, hey Alex, are you a Jew? Yeah, I'm Jewish. Well, I hate you. Why do you hate me? I didn't do that. He said, I hate you because you killed Christ. I have to tell you that I was very hurt because my little friend said that he hated me. But I was probably as confused as I was hurt because I had no idea what he was talking about. I have a high, flat forehead, and it's because a lot of wives' tales have, unfunded wives' tales have proved that people with high, flat foreheads are extremely intelligent. But that's not why I have a high flat forehead. I have a high flat forehead because I've got lots of oy vey moments in my life. And this was a very early oy vey moment. You got it. Oy vey, are you kidding? And hey, listen, when you stop and think about it, you have to laugh because we get our prejudices, our hates from those closest to us. It's a contagion. We get it from our parents and our peers. And as I thought about it, as I got older and acquired more wisdom, there's no 7-year-old child that knows what a Christ is, doesn't have enough intelligence yet, not enough knowledge, let alone accusing a 7-year-old classmate going back 2,000 years, killing their... Are you joking? Oy vey. Yes, this is what 2 illegal immigrants look like serving their country. My brother and I got here with my father as illegal immigrants, you see. A pledge had to be signed that there was a job for David Keisch. There were no jobs for us. We went up in Hartford, Connecticut because some guy in Hartford probably signed 200 of these because he's a real nice guy. I was at the United States Merchant Marine Academy. My brother just gotten back from 13 months in Vietnam. He spent an extra month there because he had an anti-Semitic lieutenant who just rode his ass hard. Story for another day. But look at this. 16 years afterwards, here I am. Where else in America could you do this? Here I am. I'm on a ship. I'm a cadet on the greatest merchant ship, passenger ship ever built, the fastest, the icon of American ingenuity. And then a few short years after that, I'm a captain of my own ship. Are you kidding me? I have to pinch myself sometimes and say, did that really happen? Oh, this was the ship I was telling you about. I made up the story, but I didn't make up the ship. This actually was the ship. At the time, my wife and I lived in a little attic apartment. I had many times more room on the ship than I did elsewhere. But you know what? All the ships I've ever been on, the one I took the greatest pride in, the one I remember the most, is the SS United States. Anybody here have more than 10 cousins? Okay, I want you to think about how close you are with your cousins. I want you to appreciate what you've done. If you have a large family, I'm very, very happy for you. I'm also slightly envious. I'm saying that because the things you take for granted were denied me. I told you my father had 13 brothers and sisters. My mother had 1 brother. She was a sophisticated city girl. All 14 of my aunts and uncles, all of my cousins, near and far, all of my grandparents, every last one slaughtered, murdered during the Holocaust. I joke a lot, but I'm very, very serious when I tell you this. Please, please, please go home tonight. Don't leave it till tomorrow, you'll forget. Don't text. Call somebody up in your family that you haven't seen in a long time. Or someone you might have had a few words with. Tell them what they mean to you. Tell them what you did today, what you experienced, what you were part of, and then tell them that you really, really love them. It's very important. And then pretend you're out of time. You've got to run, hang up, see if they call you back. A few years back, before I was involved with the Alex Shalom Holocaust Memorial Cemetery, Inga Hurwitz, who was president at the time, said, "Hey, Alex, we've got room for a couple more names. Do you want to put some names on the memorial wall?" See, Jews that live in this greater Richmond area, we remember our deceased loved ones that were swallowed up in the Holocaust by placing their names on this wall. I said, "You bet I do. I want to put my mother and father's name there." And she said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because they survived the Holocaust. They died afterwards." And then I thought about it, and I was horribly depressed for several weeks because my whole family was killed before I was born. And how are they going to be remembered if I don't have something to put up on the wall? And then, as all ADT people, we don't sleep well. We have epiphanies in the middle of the night. Boing! I said, "Whoa, I got it." We Jews name our loved ones after, our children after deceased loved ones. And my twin and I were named after our grandparents. Now, we have a service here every year, as nearest to Kristallnacht as possible. It's on a Sunday. This year it'll be at 2 o'clock, November 12th. You're all welcome to come, please. And so, bang, that's where you look. Look for my mother, my grandfathers, both of them, and say a prayer for them. May their memory be a blessing. Oh, and if anybody got a kid, brother, or sister, they need a quick $300 you can stick in your pocket and spend on foolish stuff. We have a Never Again award, and we call it now the Esther Windmiller Never Again Award because we lost Esther this year. She initiated this about 10 years ago. It's an essay that we have high schoolers write, and the winner is awarded $300, and they come and present their essay to the gathered audience. This lovely child, I call her my bonus daughter. She was here in Richmond working as a volunteer for a whole year at the Holocaust Museum. She's from Berlin. She heard my story. She felt badly that I couldn't find anybody. She went back to Germany and found my mother's grave. So she's in my heart always. That was in 2004. Inga Horowitz, my friend, went back in 2010. And then here she is again. She took her Inga and Harold Horowitz to my mother's grave. And then a couple of years ago, she just finished her PhD, did some studies in La Jolla. And on the way back on Mother's Day, we all had dinner together. And she said, oh, well, you're not showing those pictures of me. Well, she was a child then. Now she's a woman. So she went back, had her brother take these pictures so I could show pictures of her, properly attired as Dr. Jessica Klein. And what she didn't realize when I asked her to put the stones on my mother. Oh, by the way, we do that someone who loves or cares about this person, remembers that person, is reminiscent of that stone, that is indicative of that stone that you leave there. And from 1949, my mother died in 1948. 1949, my father put the stone up. And from then till 2004, there was nobody left alive. And those of us who were, it was just my twin brother, we were so far away, I had no idea. We didn't talk about this thing. But what she didn't realize she did was she put a stone for each of my 3 birth children and one set aside for my bonus daughter herself. Okay, so where are we now? Hassan Nasrallah, leader of Hezbollah. The new anti-Semitism, what do you think about Aliyah? Those of you who don't know, that's the right of all Jews to return to the homeland and be accepted as a citizen. He said, I like that. It saved us the trouble of having to hunt them down all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, anyone who says that the Holy Quran advocates terrorism obviously has not read its lesson on violence. My friend Qasim Rashid posted this one day, and I had to take it from the website. It allows you only to fight in self-defense, no aggressive wars. Not only defend Muslims from persecution, but to defend Christians, Jews, and people of all faiths. That's what the Quran says. That's what Muslims do. Here's a good example. That's the only synagogue left in Norway, by the way. Right after the kosher market in Paris was shot up so badly for no reason at all other than it was Jewish people there. This is what Muslims do. 1,300 held hands to protect the synagogue, symbolically protecting the synagogue. Why do they? Because we don't allow that nonsense here. We just don't allow it. There's still idiots who deny the Holocaust, probably the most written about event in all of human history. Hutton Gibson is one. You may not have heard of him. We get our hates and our prejudices and our stupidity from those nearest to us. You heard of Mel Gibson, that's his son. So I wasn't surprised when Mel came out with a vituperation about when he was accosted for drunk driving against all Jews everywhere, because I knew who his father was. I fixed him. I haven't watched one of his movies since then. I sit in people's homes. I interview them. I have to know something about them in order to recommend what I might want to recommend for their purposes and needs for life insurance. This is going to be a lesson of acceptance versus tolerance. And I was in the home of an 83-year-old retired Navy sailor. And as I was sitting, talking with him, Denise, you'll relate to this, shiny, ooh. She and I are both ADD. I saw a framed, it wasn't a document, it was just framed right. Do you mind if he said, please do. And as I was going over to look at what he had framed, he pulled it out of his wallet, unfolded his little folded thing. I was so impressed by it, I said, I'm going to take a moment to copy it. So I copied it. And I held that for about 2-3 months. I didn't quite know what to do with it, but then it hit me one day, I knew what to do with it. I saw Tim Hensley, our curator at the museum, our librarian. I said, Tim, find me a picture of the world in the public domain taken from space. And what I did is I created a card. I don't have great affluence, so I had friends of mine, classmates and buddies, help me, and they donated. What they did was we gave a couple thousand cards to the museum. And here's what it said on there. Let me back it up just a minute. I'll tell you the rest of the story about this sailor. He was a very sad individual because he had only one woman he loved his whole life, his wife, girlfriend. He'd never been with any other woman. Even though he was gone for long periods of time, emotionally they were never separated. When his wife became ill, he had someone come in to help with her. And she passed within a short time after that. And this woman saw this man bereft with grief and sadness. So on her own, she would come once a month or twice a month just to be with him, walk around the retirement home grounds there, and maybe share a cup of coffee or soda. And the whole time they were doing this, the other tenants there were going, and the reason we're doing that is because he was Caucasian and she was a lady of color. But you see, they tolerated her. They accepted one another, he and she, as someone in need of help, in need of a hug, and someone who was needing to give someone that hug. So here's what he had written down. Here's what I took from him. Why did God create only one man? Ed, would you read that for me?
So that thereafter no one could say, my ancestors were nobler than yours, or that virtue and vice are inherited, or that some races are better than others. And
now this is the part you'll recognize. The part that came before, you don't. This part you will recognize.
to teach us that whoever destroys a single life is as guilty as though he had destroyed the entire world. And that whoever saves one life earns as much merit as if he had saved the whole world.
It's in the museum. Anytime you want to pick it up, it's $1 a card. It's donated 100% to the museum. Another lesson in tolerance versus acceptance. Before the war, Denmark had 7,600 Jews. After the war was discovered, they lost 60, were murdered. Very, very admirable. Bulgaria did even better. They had 50,000 Jews before the war. They had 50,000 Jews after the war. Now, why did Europe, the rest of Europe, send their Jews to death? Even the French. Liberty, equality, fraternity, but not for the Jews. It was because most of Europe tolerated their Jews. The Danes and the Bulgarians accepted them as brothers and sisters. And what's really unique is that King Boris II was part of the Axis power. He defied them. He played little games with them. He allowed the Jews to go into work camps where life was hard, as it was under Pharaoh, but they weren't being murdered. Now, they did have to give up Thrace and Macedonia, but those weren't their territories during that time. They were acquired. They're historically the territories they were acquired after the First World War. Here's Ambassador Elena Papaтодorova. Question?
Albania. Albania.
Albania had more Jews after the war than before the war. I tried getting some numbers on that, and I couldn't quite get my handle on that.
I saw it was 250 before the war and about 2,000 after.
Thank you, thank you. And that's where some Jews would go to hide. And I thanked her profusely. She was there to apologize because they had to give up the Jews from Thrace and Macedonia. This man, he doesn't know, but he's very influential in my life, Pierre Sauvage. He was a Holocaust survivor born in Le Chambon, France. His mother and father, and probably all the other 5,000 that were saved, were from Poland. They were hidden by 5,000 French Huguenots. See, these people knew what hate meant. They knew what discrimination was because they were persecuted fiercely. They had no idea that you shouldn't do this. They just knew you should. Why did they do that? We don't allow that crap here. We just don't allow it here. So Pierre Sauvage was influential in my speaking, though he doesn't know it. He's an internationally award-winning videographer. He went back in the 1990s and recorded these people and asked them each what their story was. And that was what he won the award for. But the reason he encouraged me, not knowing it, is that he was only 1 year old. He was born in La Chambon when the war was over. And since I was only weeks old when the war was over, he didn't know any more than I did. What he knew, he gleaned from hard work, from research, from interviewing, as did I. And that encouraged me to go out and talk. But also encouraged me in the direction I wanted to talk about. You see, there are no bystanders. You do have a choice. How did 5,000 save 5,000? They didn't think about it. Elie Wiesel, who you all know, was once asked what lesson can we learn from the Holocaust. His reply, that you can get away with it. It's kind of a sad commentary. Consider some of his other thoughts. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. To remain silent and indifferent is the greatest sin of all. We all have choices. You can speak up. You can. But how do you do that without getting punched in the face? Without getting killed? We'll get to that. This is my beautiful daughter. She's just back a couple of years from Korea, teaching English there. She got bullied out of high school. Long, blonde, flowing hair. In the late 1990s, there was a Jewish wrestler called Goldberg, who also had long, blonde, curly hair. When she went away to the first year of high school, just happy as can be, they tortured her. When she walked in a public space, the cry and hue went up, Goldberg, Goldberg. When she went to the restroom, she's beautiful, she's athletic, she's gregarious, she's outgoing, she's intelligent. When she went to the restroom, the other little girls said, I'm going to cut you, come in here again. She would hold back until she got home to use the restroom. They were afraid that she was so attractive that she was going to steal her boyfriends. The little boys were all shorter than he because she was tall for her age. So I went to see the principal of the school. I wanted to tell him what the problem was. This was going on for about a year and a half. I was hoping it'd work itself out. It never did. It just got worse because even the teachers get involved, rolling on the floor, laughing. So I sat down with him. I had an appointment to see him. This is not inner city school. This is a very well-known public school. And I told him what was going on. He said, well, just give me the names. I'm an observer of the human condition. I'm not a scholar. I just report. And I know what would happen if he had the names. It would just get worse for my daughter. I never asked my daughter for the names for that reason. I had no intention. I don't care who it was. I just wanted to stop. I figured he was a professional. He knew how to stop this. Let me speak with him. So I said, no. I explained to him what I just explained to you. And he said, after a few more minutes, just give me their names. And I didn't mean to insult him. I really didn't. I, from my heart, said, sir, you are the captain of this ship. And it's bad that your ship is sinking, but what is sadder is that you don't even know your ship is sinking. And he stood up in a very gruff voice, says, I don't have to put up with this insult. Get out of here. And the next day, I broke apart my piggy bank, which I still work today. I put her in private school. She flourished in private school. She had, after that, had only one B. She was at the verge of being dropped out of school. She had only one B throughout college and throughout her high school career after that. Hey, listen, did you know that suicide is the third leading cause of death among young people 10 to 24 years old? Or did you know there's a strong link between bullying and suicide? There's also a link between being a bully and committing suicide. Bullies are not very happy people. Many adults see bullying as just a part of being a kid. It is not. It is not. Bullying victims are 2 to 9 times more likely to consider suicide than non-victims. 10 to 14-year-old girls may even be at higher risk. I don't have the numbers on them. At least half of all suicides among young people related to bullying? Are you kidding me? I mean, that's just amazing. Here's some stats. 4,600 last year, 2013. I can research the new numbers. They're not going to change much. half as a result of bullying? That's an epidemic. Bullying and genocide, is there a link? Hey, I'm better, I'm smarter, I'm more worthy, I'm taller, I'm skinnier, prettier, more handsome, wealthier, stronger, faster, more pious, paler, darker than you. Is there a link? Is there a link? Is there a link? Is this the next phase of bullying? Is this the next phase of bullying? Untermensch, German word for racially inferior people. Untermensch. Eddie designed this for me. Eddie is beautiful, thank you. My personal belief, genocides are the end result of decades, generations, sometimes centuries of bullying. I'm not a scholar. I'm an armchair historian, but I am an observer and reporter of the human condition. Is this how it winds up? Darfur? People's Republic of Congo? Bullying, the caustic, primal soup that gestates and spawns genocides? Amanda, when I knew you were coming here today, I had to include this as well. Amanda, my friend Amanda, is a survivor of the Cambodian genocide. Okay, Keisch, we got to do something. Let's pass some laws. That's what we need. We need lots of laws. I've watched the laws increase through the years. The favorite question people ask me, well, the 49 states anti-bullying laws, what's the state that's a holdout? It was North Dakota, by the way, just for curiosity's sake, but they're all getting up there. They're all passing more and more laws. That'll stop this nonsense. However, 73% of children will be bullied in school, much higher if you're gay. 20% of children 11 to 18 years old have been victims of cyberbullying. 13 million children will be bullied this year. 13 million children. So we got lots of laws about littering too. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, we still litter. Why is that? And in some nations, you don't see any litter. It's because we don't allow that here. It's just the natural consciousness will just not allow that. It just won't happen. What if there was something we could do that worked powerfully along with laws, school rules, parental guidelines to stop bullies? Is there an easy, simple technique that I can use? If I'm bullied or I see others being bullied that is non-confrontational, this is going to be your take-home pay. Put this in your pocket, guys. What if I could be a part of the systemic solution, systemic change that would stop bullies, become an upstander? There are no bystanders. You're part of the problem if you're not part of the solution. Yes, it's called a mantra. What is a mantra? A statement repeated frequently. And here's the statement. We don't allow that here. It's a simple but not simplistic approach. We don't allow that here. If you're being bullied and someone's being aggressive toward, do not confront them. Do not look them in the eye. Just keep walking the direction you intend to walk. If you have to deviate, deviate. But you repeat over and over again, we don't allow that here, we don't allow that here, we don't allow that here. You see, it withdraws your permission for being bullied. It's your armor shield. We don't allow that here. It removes the bully's audience. You see, if the audience then repeats the mantra, we don't allow that here, and it's taken up like a crescendo, he has no more audience. He's doing this because he needs some kind of recognition. Now you're transformed from being a bystander, you're part of the solution. We don't allow that here. Empowers an intended victim. I got something I can do. I have a little girl. That little girl looks just like my mother. When she first learned how to walk, she had to hold on to something. She had to hold, you know how she became empowered? She held onto her shirt and walked like this. She was holding on to something. This empowers you. It gives you something to hold on to. We don't allow their attacks the bully's action. Not the bully. The worst thing I can have is after a talk, I have people come up, they stand in line and say, well, I did that bully a real sudden boy. All you've done is driven the poison further down. You haven't done anything. You've probably made it worse. We don't allow that here. Also empowers us as we transition into upstanders. We can do something about who we are. We're not a target any longer. We don't allow that here is passively aggressive. Passively aggressive. We don't allow that here involves us all. We become the grassroots systemic solution to stop the problem of bullying. It's a simple, not simplistic approach to stop bullying. Now, what am I doing? Well, my legacy is going to be to teach the Holocaust, empower you with knowledge, inspire you to action, stop bullies without confrontation. I do that by going out and speaking. I take tours at the Holocaust Museum. This was 55 soldiers from Fort Lee I did a while back. I go and talk with school children. This is the United States Marine Academy. I went back and did a talk for them. I get interviewed on the radio from time to time. I lecture at the Holocaust Museum. This is when you were at my first show, Lindsay, my first talk. Instructing future leaders in how to become upstanders. Here I was at Fort Lee a couple of years ago. Yeah, you know, Captain Keisch, that's all good. You're a big, strong guy. You got a big voice. You run fast. You're mean. You're ugly, whatever. But I'm just a little twerp. What the heck can I do? I mean, I'm just a little person. I don't know anything. I don't know anybody. If you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Try sleeping. You're not too small to make a difference. We don't allow there diffuses reciprocity by the bully both towards the intended victim and the bystanders. Hey, it's not me. It's the all-empowering we. Don't allow it. Not me. We. Bishop Desmond Tutu. Do your little bits of good wherever you are. It is these little bits of good done everywhere that overpower the world, overwhelm the world. Lindsay, thank you so much. A couple weeks after my first talk, she went to her elementary school, and they put that up. I'm sorry it's not up. There should be a permanent one up there. The children. We must teach the children early and often. I didn't want to go to a grade school, but they told me that this grade school was prepared, and these fifth graders were probably the best audience I ever spoke to. They were just wonderful. They were terrific. Do a little bit of good. Learn the mantra. We don't allow that here. Do a little bit of good. Use the mantra. We don't allow that here. Do a little bit of good. Teach the mantra. We don't allow that here. Navigate my website. Invite me to share my lesson at your church, your club, your synagogue, your scout troop. Have talk, we'll travel. I'll be in Lexington the day after tomorrow talking to a Hillel group at Washington and Lee military base. I'll be at Yorktown talking to the Naval Weapons Station there Friday. Let's review quickly. The earth bled with 7 genocides the last century. One was a Holocaust. When is this crap going to stop? We're once again backsliding into anti-Semitism, bullying is at epidemic proportions. We can stop bullies. We can stop bullies. The systemic solution will stop bullies because we just don't allow that here. Now we want to get to acceptance. Here's a good example of a very smart individual who I have a great deal of respect for. He was being interviewed by Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes. Morgan Freeman. Black History Month, Mike Wallace said, you find ridiculous. Why? You got to relegate my history to 1 month? What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? I'm Jewish. All right. Which month is Jewish History Month? There isn't one. Why not? Do you want one? No. I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history. Well, how are we going to get rid of racism? Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man. I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman. Very profound. Very profound. You find these examples everyday life. Are we ever going to get there? I don't know. Vince Lombardi, a great motivator, coach, great American. Gentlemen, we are going to relentlessly chase perfection, knowing full well we'll not catch it, but because nothing is perfect. But we are going to relentlessly chase it because in the process we will catch excellence. Now, I want you to change 2 words. Just those two words. Perfection will not be acceptance. Excellence will be tolerance. Let's see what that looks like. Gentlemen, we're going to relentlessly chase acceptance, knowing full well we'll never catch it, because nothing is perfect, but we are going to relentlessly chase it, because in the process, we will catch tolerance. See, we all kind of set goals for ourselves. Most of us set our goals too low. Most of us set our goals, I'm going to pay my bills. And you don't quite make it, so you never quite get your bills paid. Set your goals high. Shoot for those goals. If you miss the star, you might hit an eagle. Oh, sorry, the kids are singing A, B, C. We didn't get the sound on there. I thought we were going to, but we didn't. Oh, okay, I spent a lot of time talking. I got myself really dry in the throat. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate you all being here. I hope you guys take something home from this. And I want this to be more than a hot water bath motivation. When you get out of the bath, you feel good for about an hour or two. I want you to take to heart that concept of we don't allow that here. How can you use that in your own personal life? When can you use it? How can you use it as a protective shield? Do I have any questions at all from anybody? Thank you so much for coming. Rabbi.
Please join me in thanking Captain Keisch for joining us
You
today.
demoted me to doctor.
Thank you very much.